back. We're live. Wow. It's noon. Well, almost noon. Here on ThinkTech on a given Wednesday.
That's right. It's Wednesday afternoon.
Okay, that's Keli'i Akina of Grassroot Institute.
Well, aloha, everybody, and Jay Fidell, delighted today to be with you.
And we're talking about we're talking about Keli'i and me we're connecting the dots. Okay, we're finding the sea changes is what we're doing.
I think you might want to explain a little bit about sea changes. We're not all seafarers.
Right. Okay. Well, it's true. It's a naval concept. You can look and see things on the ocean. Mm-hmm. You can see storms. You can see other ships. You can see land. But sea changes are more hard to identify, and they're always happening. And sometimes they're happening seriously. In other words, the sea might be changing in a way that affects your voyage. Okay?
There might be a calm, but there's a perfect storm on its way.
That's right. And a sea change is going to tell you that. A sea change tells you what's going to happen.
Well, people like you, Jay, I know, are good at reading the signs, being able to tell what's coming down the road. So
reading the signs.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to trademark that if that's a good brand.
Yeah, reading the signs, yeah. So reading the signs, seeing the sea changes, connecting the dots, all these are possible names of our show going forward, where you and me, we sit and we make analysis and reaction to what's going on around us.
Well, I think that's because when you and I sit down, we try to ask questions like, where is this heading? What does this policy that has just popped up in the legislature mean? What does this new law mean? So we're not so concerned about maybe a protest or a certain thing in the public eye at a moment. I've learned from you the importance of asking, what's underneath this? What's ahead? What's the sea change?
Yeah, where are we going? What connecting the dots to, may I use the term ahu, okay? Have you ever hiked, on Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa?
I've been up there, yes.
Okay, and they have ahus there. And the ahu is a little triangular, conical structure of stones that people put up there for actually navigational purposes. Because in the case of Mauna Loa, you don't know what's up and down. It's so big, it's just enormously big. So, traditionally, hikers and visitors have put ahus around. And so you navigate your way around the mountain.
That's right.
By going from ahu to ahu. And you can't see them beyond, I'd say, 50 yards or so.
Well, there are these signs, obviously, that tell us where we're going. And I think our viewers today are probably asking that question. Where are Keli'i and Jay going with this show?
It's methodology. It's an approach. Yeah. And if they don't have it, they don't understand it by now, I can't help them.
Recently something popped up in the news, and I think it fits exactly what you're talking about. The City Ethics Commission has adopted these rather draconian rules by which they say before any staff person can actually talk to a media person, they have to go through a long process of getting approvals. In fact, let me read part of that. Any written media communications, and I'm just quoting what they're telling their staff now, put out by the commission now needs to be sent in order to commission members, complainants, respondents, the mayor and his cabinet, city council members, and then media and members of the general public who have asked to see the news release. Isn't that something? What do you think about that? How does that affect transparency in the job that the commission should do?
Well, I mean, you hardly want to make any statements anymore. It's really telling you don't make any statements.
Well, just on the surface of it, it doesn't even seem efficient. When you have a functioning organization like an ethics commission looking into a large caseload, the media are going to be around all the time. The public are going to be around all the time. You want your people to be able to give the news as it's developing.
It's indefensible. Mm-hmm. But it's also transparent. If you think about it, it's saying don't make any statements. We don't want you to talk to the press. And that's very important, I mean, in our time, because, it's a conundrum for the people involved. They are so afraid of talking to the press. They are so afraid of saying anything or being misquoted about having said something that they are not going to make statements.
Right.
We have a lot of situations here in ThinkTech where we, read it in the paper or we hear about some issue and we want to call somebody in and get them down or her talk about some controversial issue very hard. Nobody wants to take a chance.
That's right. Now, the thing about this that is really infuriating, I think, is that the Ethics Commission is set up for the purpose of establishing a standard called ethics. And ethics involves transparency and openness. And if they themselves, as a commission, can't model that and practice it, how can they supervise our government and see that that takes place? Now, what's interesting is that the staff themselves responded and wrote the following. This is from an internal report that wasn't adopted by the commission based upon these rules. And this is what the staff said. Quote, "This will be counterproductive to the goals of ethics, education, and transparency." Can you believe that? And they went ahead with it.
They should all quit.
Well, you know,
They should all protest right out of that job, that whole organization.
it's not over with. One of the commissioners was not present. He was traveling at the time, and his comments appear in an editorial in the Star Advertiser. That's former Attorney General Michael
Mike
Lilly.
Lilly.
And based on his comments, he's going to come back and express some disagreement with this. The only dissenting vote was the chairperson. She also disagreed with it. But you know why, Jay, I brought this up? Because this is just in the news. It's surfaced, and it's going to disappear. And who's going to be talking about it? And who's going to be asking the question that you're asking? What is this a sign of? Is there something deeper? Is there something underneath this action that was taken by the commission? And you know, there are people who are starting to raise that question now.
Yeah, well, can we talk a little further about
Yes,
that?
let's
That
do
white
that.
hot spot right there. You know, it seems to me that this is also a statement that we don't trust the media.
Yes.
And the question then is, I mean, for us, for you and me in this show, connecting the dots and finding the sea changes and what have you, can you trust the media?
That's right. In fact, one of the commentators now on this situation is a media person, Professor Gerald Cato at the University of Hawaii School of Journalism.
He's like the dean over there.
Yeah,
isn't he?
this is
The
what
chair he is. Yeah.
He said this in response to reporters' questions, that regardless of the intent of the rules, and I quote now, "It certainly creates that impression that the public is secondary or ancillary to the process, and yet the public is a very important part of that process. Quote, controlling the message or the messenger is the wrong tack if the powers that be feel," and then he goes on and talks about different situations. So you're in journalism. That's what ThinkTech Hawaii is all about. The actions of the commission actually muzzle our ability to get information when we need it.
Yeah, if we want anything from them, oh, it's going to be terrible hard to get it.
Yeah, somebody has to respond from their staff and say, well, we can't talk to you until all these people have been informed and signed off, and that includes the mayor, that includes the cabinet and all of this.
It's not sustainable.
It isn't.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one time I had a conversation with one of the guys on at the time it was the Honolulu Advertiser, and I said, you guys ought to go on a campaign to liberalize what do you call it, the transparency law.
Are you talking about information? Are you talking about the sunshine laws?
Sunshine law.
Yes.
And he said, how dare we even suggest that? When I say liberal, I mean let people talk. Don't
Right.
muzzle everybody, and don't give them this really artificial thing about having to do it in the formality of the meeting. I mean, the University of Hawaii is a good example of what happens if you apply the Sunshine Law to people who should be thinking solutions to problems.
That's right. Now, Jay, I'm going to give you a little bit of blame here. When I look at the composition of the commission, the City Ethics Commission, most of them, if not all of them, are lawyers, and many of them are former judges. How in the world did they, with their insight into law, insight into our open government laws, our Freedom of Information Act, our Sunshine laws, and so forth, how did these legally trained minds come up with a policy like this for their own organization?
Don't operate on the assumption that lawyers are all for the First Amendment. Lawyers are for risk management.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
This is about risk management. This is about protecting the client. In this case, protecting maybe the people involved before the commission. And there have been spurious reports that injured people, and I'm sure they got political backlash on it. And there's reasons for them doing this. But I agree that they're not good reasons.
Well, you know, you talk about minimizing risk, and I think this is part of the problem in terms of understanding ethics. Ethics has been reduced, it seems, to merely being compliance with law. In other words, ethics panels, ethicists, lawyers, forgive me.
I give you a standing forgiveness.
There you go.
Yeah.
Answer the question, is it ethical, by does it allow us to go up to the line of breaking the law without crossing over? So the whole spirit of what constitutes ethics, the whole purpose of ethics, the philosophy of being transparent, they're not quantifiable legally. And as a result, then, the only thing frequently ethics commissions can deal with is, was the law violated? And there's a huge difference, Jay, between whether law is fulfilled or whether something is ethical.
All that so, you know, I would throw this in the ring on our discussion, and that is, it's really about the way the press uses the information.
Sure.
And the way the public sees what's reported in the press. And the Ethics Commission, you know, let me say this.
Yes.
Some of the complaints, it's always on, well, not always, but usually on complaint from a third party, right? Comes to the Ethics Commission and say, you ought to investigate this, or you ought to sock this guy because he violated this or that or the other thing, right? Okay, and then they have to make a decision.
Well, you know, I'm going to draw, go ahead.
So, you know, the problem is they could hurt somebody.
That's right.
And they have hurt people, and some of those complaints, you know, are dead wrong. They're dead wrong, and they're only politically motivated to hurt people. I've seen this a number of times. And so if you let that out prematurely, you're going to give license to those political complaints. This is not a good thing, because the press will take that as raw meat. Raw meat is what sells newspapers or television time, right? And then somebody will be hurt and misinformed, and the public eats that up, like in the gladiatorial pit. They eat that up, and the point of this show is about distraction.
That's right.
So, you know, it's so easy to distract the public.
It may very well be, according to some people, that the Ethics Commission is using these rules to distract the public from some investigations that have gone forward. The person who gets most impacted by these rules is Mr. Toto, who is the executive director of the City Ethics Commission. But it's no secret that in the recent past, he's raised some questions that have been very uncomfortable, such as with regard to Romy Cacciola, some of his campaign funds that he'd received and used illegally, we allege now, and actually know now, or have determined, came from lobbyists who were promoting a certain project that he voted on. The same question was raised.
That couldn't be the rail project, could it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, thank you.
The same question, according to Hawaii News Now, was raised about city council. Let me just read to you part of what H&N has said. The debate over whether votes of 4 Honolulu City Council members who voted in favor of rail transit should be nullified because of ethics violations heated up Wednesday as Chuck Toto, head of the City Ethics Commission, came under fire from his bosses for talking about the subject. So there are news media out there that are starting to put 2 and 2 together, starting to maybe see some of the direction the signs are going here, or as you're talking about, what the distraction is really all about. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of this is a distraction. You know, I don't know if I mentioned to you on the phone when we spoke, but, you know, there are only a handful of priorities for the survival of this place to keep it away from, you know, the inevitable challenge of backwater. Okay, one of them is less disparity of income. Another one, that is decent jobs and decent housing and decent traffic infrastructure. That's it. That's it. I mean, you go down in the legislature every year and there's 3,500 bills. You know, 3,400 of them are not necessary and a waste of our time and tax dollars to run multi-million-dollar legislative process. And we have got to get away from distraction. The other problem, which I'd like to cover with you somewhere in this discussion, is the problem of amnesia. It's so easy to forget. The fickle finger writes in the newspaper or in the media, you know, and 2 weeks later, there's another distraction.
I think you're
and
right.
Everybody forgets what happened 2 weeks ago. We are distracted from our distractions.
That's right.
Is what happens.
You know, and that's, in a sense, I'll say to our viewers, why we're belaboring this so much today. because the news media report that the City Ethics Commission adopted these rules will soon be distant in our memory. It will be. And we'll forget about what may be entailed in that. And I think I would add to your list of real issues that are beneath the surface, the question of whether and how government is really serving the people.
And I forgot one too.
Yes.
It's how to make us love each other yet again.
Oh, absolutely.
We have forgotten to do that. Anyway, but talk about amnesia. Let's see how much you can forget in 1 minute while we take a break. This is a test, okay? This is Keli'i and me, Keli'i Akina of Grassroot Institute, and me, and we are avoiding distraction in Hawaii. We're connecting the dots. We're reading the signs. And where are we going anyway? We're going to find out step by step. We'll be right back. Don't forget.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you Center Stage.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I hope you didn't forget Keli'i and me. And P.S., we have a Twitter handle, and you can tweet us. It's ThinkTech Hi, H-I. Okay, and we have a favorite of a tweet from Violet Gilmore. She talks about this show coming at noon. She says, Keli'i Akina joins Jay in the studio to discuss the leadership in Hawaii, that's inherent here, and suggest alternatives to the current situation. So yeah, send us tweets. We want to engage with you. This is all about civic engagement and Mahayana.
Mahayana,
for the greater good.
I didn't know you were a Buddhist.
In my heart, I am.
There
for
you
sure.
go.
Yeah.
And make sure people tweet us at ThinkTech HI.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move forward a little bit and talk about another big issue, which is, so full of other sub-issues, and it's TMT.
The 30-meter telescope.
30-meter telescope, and really important that we know the background of it, we know what's happening now, we know the implications of what's happening now. You want to give us a little background?
Well, for a period of approximately 9 years, our community, in terms of business, government, the Native Hawaiian community, environmentalists, and others, have vetted a project that brings together at least 6 nations, multiple universities, and a whopping $1.4 billion to build what would be the premier, largest telescope on planet Earth. And the value of that telescope will be to be able to see back as close as we possibly can to the origins of the universe. And the scientific and eventual technological knowledge from this is just utterly, utterly incredible. Let me just say this at the outset. While people are very much divided in the reaction that we see going on today, as a Native Hawaiian, I'm one of many part Native Hawaiians who are very proud, very, very proud of the fact that our tradition of understanding the stars, being able to navigate by them, being able to translate a knowledge of nature and a respect for nature into value for society is going forward with the 30-meter telescope. I recognize that there are individuals who don't hold that view, and I respect their right to hold a different view, but I wanted, at least at the very outset, Jay, to let you know how I felt about that.
Yeah, and when I arrived here, which was 1st of October, 1965, I went down to Ala Moana Beach. I'm in a lot of places, but that's one place, and I looked at the people, and they were beautiful. The people here were beautiful. I'd never seen this kind of, polyglot kind of melding and merging of the races. And I said, my gosh, this is a statement of human excellence, whether it happened intentionally or it just happened by accident. Here we are, and it is the center for me of the universe. We have to capture the excellence and perpetuate the excellence.
That's right.
And you know, I think for a while I really thought that was happening. At some point, I think I decided it wasn't happening, and I don't think it's happening now.
You may be a little jaded, but let me tell you, there is much to praise about the extent to which it has happened, and we'd like more of that coming together of cultures to take place. I remember back when I was a teenager and the hokulea was being developed. What a wonderful concept, an attempt to reproduce the actual construction methods and materials of the native Hawaiian peoples, the peoples who came here from other parts of Polynesia, and to reproduce their capacity to voyage using the stars. I thought that was just so exciting in terms of validating the culture, validating the knowledge base that was here before others came to Hawaii. But what really struck me, because I spent a lot of time down there myself, was that the pilot for the hokulea, a young man at the time who is now a cherished member of our society, Nainoa Thompson, would go into the Bishop Museum Planetarium, state-of-the-art once ago, a while
Maybe
ago.
not so much anymore, yeah.
And spend hour upon hour using the technology of the planetarium in order to locate the stars so that he could train himself to try to reproduce what the native Hawaiians spent centuries developing. And I just thought that is the coming together of cultures.
Yeah, it was. And I made my own mind up to stay around for it. I wanted to see it, you know, evolve. But unfortunately, it hasn't evolved in a way I might have hoped.
And I think you're getting to one of the fundamental questions that I hope we'll get back to talking about. Well, there is a telescope being built, or actually in delay right now, while there's opposition to it right now, while there are political issues that are very tense at the moment, there's some deeper issues that people aren't talking about quite so much.
Yeah.
And one of them happens to deal with what you've said. Who are we as a people? What is our vision for society? Are we, forgive me for using this phrase, but it's beautiful, it comes from the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all? Or are we just the coming together of competing special interest groups, competing people, almost in a balkanized state? And I think that question deserves to be addressed at some point, because people who built this wonderful nation, as well as the Hawaii that we experience, have had a vision similar to the one you had when you landed here in Hawaii, and that was a place where we can be one nation together, equal under the law.
Well, you gotta be realistic. You know that people are self-interested, but it's a balance. It's a tipping point kind of thing. And I like to think that in a society where more people than not are interested in the common good, you know, that's going to be a better
That's right.
society, because you care about your neighbor, you want the whole community to do well, and you're giving, you care about your brother.
That's right.
In a community where everybody is greedy, where everybody is in his own silo, operating on kuleana only, and if that's, you know, more often than not, you're in a society that isn't going anywhere and will be injurious to at least a number of people in it. And I think we're crossing the tipping point on that, and we have to wake up to it. It is a sea change that we need to know about.
That's right. You know, there are some things going on that are also counterproductive, I think. We care about the poor. We also care about Native Hawaiians here, who in some ways are disproportionately represented in some of the lower demographic measures. We care about the homeless. We care about the people who don't have enough health care and so forth. Stopping the TMT from going forward is actually going to harm the most needy in society, because what the TMT represents and contributes to is a robust economy for Hawaii, is a vision of Hawaii as being a place where investors can come from across the world, bring capital, bring technology, and see it bear fruit. And if we damage that any more than that reputation.
So we've already
is
damaged that.
Absolutely. What happens is the economy is affected. The trickle down is there's not enough housing, prices are skyrocketing, not enough job opportunities for people. And who gets hurt the most? Not the kid that goes to MIT and then settles down in Boston, but the ones who are here, who are homeless and needy. And so to me, that disturbs me deeply, because recently, CNBC, you saw this probably, put out again its annual report on the worst and best places for business in America.
Ago, yeah.
And guess where we ranked?
The worst, the very worst.
Number 50. There's
50 out of
no
50.
place worse than us. And now people may say, well, that's media, CNBC. But take the opposite political spectrum, a place like the Mercatus Institute that puts forth a very detailed libertarian account. We're ranked 47th in the nation.
It's really the same thing.
And then the Fraser Institute up in Canada, that's not involved in American politics, ranks us lower than several states in Mexico in terms of...
But it's not a surprise.
And you see, our reputation got hit terribly with the fiasco of the super ferry. There were a group of businessmen in New York who lost at least 70 million. Our state lost about 200 million. People still talk about that today in Singapore when they talk about investment in Hawaii.
But you know
what happened to the super ferry?
That was, what, 2008 or 9, when all those things were happening, and the Supreme Court kept ruling against them, driving them to go out of business. That was, what, 7 or 8 years ago. If you started a super ferry today, you would get the same result. Everybody would be against it. So we have a sea change that we don't like to talk about, but it's there. And, you know, it is
Sure.
it is expressed in the whole super ferry affair and in the TMT affair.
Well, you said that if we had the prospect of the super ferry again today, quote, everybody would be against it. In one sense, I would agree with you that there would be great opposition. But I think you'd agree with me that it may be an overstatement to say everybody. In fact, with
enough people to stop it.
That's right.
That's everybody.
And the amazing thing is that sufficient number to stop progress is actually an exceedingly small number. It's a tiny number. The number of protesters against the 30-meter telescope is a minority of a minority of a minority of the state of Hawaii.
And yet that governs.
And that's an interesting thing that we need to talk about, and it's not being talked about. It's politically correct to say we must honor the native Hawaiian people and the host culture. And I don't believe we should dishonor them, and I believe as being part of that and as being a citizen in the state, we should. But underneath that question is the unasked question: who really represents the native Hawaiian community?
It's hard to find a leader of the native Hawaiian community.
Is it a group of people who are protesting? Is it the officials who sit in government organizations such as the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, the Native Hawaiian Royal Commission, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands? Is it the self-proclaimed sovereign nations?
Is it Walter Riddick?
Yeah, and we could go on with many names, and I think that what we have to do is be realistic about the fact that the vast majority of people who are part of the Hawaiian ethnicity, part Hawaiian blood, are thoroughly integrated into our culture. They're graduates of Kamehameha, they are CEOs of corporations, they are middle class who own homes, and so forth. And the vast majority of them are not protesting. The vast majority are not walking out of their government jobs. Right, we're a quiet people. I mean, we have the lowest voter turnout in the entire nation. And certainly, we're not going to see the majority of people who are part Hawaiian standing up in ways the minority are. It's a silent majority.
We as a people let it happen with a tiny minority running the show. And there was a piece in the paper yesterday, I think, asking whether this was a democracy in Hawaii or is it a theocracy.
That's right.
Because when you get into this culture, it is essentially a religion. And it seems to be dictating policy in all areas. I mean, we have some problems we have to deal with, And one of them is the apathy that you find at the voter level, low voter turnout, and a low willingness of the average person who actually follows this to say boo about it. He didn't say anything about it. And so a few shrill voices control the policy.
Now, I don't necessarily blame people for being silent or blame people for being so discouraged that they don't want to participate in a political process that they don't think they can influence in any way. But at the same time, I would like to encourage everyone out there who cares deeply and wants to throw his or her hat into the ring to get involved in some way, whether it is writing editorials, whether it is joining community groups, running for office, whatever it means, because I think now is a time when people will respond if leaders rise up to the challenge and say, this is where we're going, and here is a better way. And I think that people are ready for that, because I sense that there's a lot of growing disgruntlement with business as usual, whether it is the toleration of what's going on at the 30-meter telescope, or the way that government continues to evade sunshine and freedom of information laws.
We don't have to agree on everything. I'm less optimistic than you are. I mean, I feel that there are processes in place, there are cultural, sociological points in place here that stand in the way of that.
Sure.
It's a nice thought, but it's not very likely to happen. And I think that maybe a full discussion or a continuing discussion of these things here, you and me and others at ThinkTech, is very beneficial. To get those thoughts out
That's
there
right.
and have reach more people. But if I ask you today, how do you think the TMT thing is going to work out? Can you be confident that it will work out? Do you see a telescope there in 5 years? I don't.
That's a daunting question, because when we consider the consequences of the failure of the TMT to go forward, the effects will be massive on Hawaii. We mentioned earlier the super ferry and how that has dampened Hawaii's reputation as an investment destination for venture capital. That was a project that brought 70 million plus 200 million. I mean, we're talking about no more than $300 million there. This TMT is $1.4 billion. If it fails, how soon do you think we're going to get 6 nations coming together and investing $1.4 billion?
Never again.
Well,
some people say, Keli'i, that it will never happen again anyway.
Well,
that we as a telescope venue, we're finished.
I would add to that, just to be somewhat a doomsayer for a little bit longer in this conversation, but I don't want to end there. Those who oppose progress in Hawaii are growing in their capacity to practice their opposition. New methodologies have developed. Keen use of the media has developed. And we often see some of the same leaders in one event after another, whether it's opposition to GMOs on Kauai and Maui. Many of those leaders have ended up participating in the anti-TMT movement. So there's almost a cottage industry of being in opposition to projects that serve the greater good. And I think that that's going to be something we're going to be dealing with more and more. And not only that, our government is continuing to kowtow, not to show the kind of courageous leadership that is needed to stand up and say, a tiny minority cannot obstruct progress for the majority.
Yeah, hard to fix this. What it really means is that nobody really, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people in the community don't want to abide by the will of the majority, that they feel that they can stand in the way of the will of the majority and make a controversy continue forever. And I mean, I think if we do that, what we're going to be engaged in is the controversy business. That's what we'll be doing. This is the biggest distraction of all.
You know, what's interesting is this, that although it's noon and we're having this conversation on a Wednesday in the middle of a working week, there are people watching and tweeting. Jay, if you don't mind, let me call up one of these tweets that has just come in from a gentleman named Mark Ward. He says, a society overwhelmed by feelings of powerlessness becomes consumed with important stories like Ben Affleck's divorce, etc. Mark, thank you for your tweet. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I kind of remember back during the O.J. Simpson trial, when there were so many national and international stories that didn't get covered because every night we were watching that white, what was it, a Chevy or that SUV over and over again going down the LA freeway.
Yeah, really.
Thank you. That speaks to the point of today's program, that there are things that distract us.
Yeah, and then we forget the priorities. We get distracted, and then we get distracted by the distraction, away from the distraction, and we forget where we started out. And so we have initiatives that are good ideas, but we never do them because we're always getting distracted. And I think it's up to us, really, here at ThinkTech, and you and me here on the show, whatever we're going to call it. What are we going to call it?
Well, I hope we don't keep calling it
Avoiding
Keli'i
distraction.
Avoiding distraction.
Is to avoid distraction, is to keep our eye on the ball. And the ball is finding that social compact again, where everybody likes each other and not having this kind of controversy, which is at the root of it. I think it's resentment of some kind. And then building infrastructure that will keep us a 21st century state. Just a second. Okay. Housing and jobs. Those basic, and the other things we mentioned. And those things are always the priority. They are the things that will keep us moving and viable. And everything like Ben Affleck's issue, you know, are really, they're flotsam, and we can't spend a lot of time on them. So that's what we should do here on this discussion.
I think so. And you know, I would also add to your list of issues that are beneath the surface, values that we hold dear, that have built this nation and brought us together, that need to be preserved. Ideas such as individual liberty, freer markets, and government that's accountable to the people. All of these issues, whether it's the TMT, the navigation of GMO, have to do with our liberty here in this nation, our ability to make a living, raise our children, be confident that our property rights are protected, the ability to invest money, do a business, and to know that when the regulations have been met, you're going to be able to proceed.
The rule of law.
Rule of law.
Which has been completely forgotten in the TMT.
It reminds me of the way we used to talk about Beijing and investing in the People's Republic of China. People didn't want to do that because you'd invest your money, you'd get all the permits, you'd get the go-ahead from the government, start your factory, and then the government would come in and take your property.
Want something else from you, yeah.
And here, how sad that today we cannot be assured of the rule of law in our own island state.
You know, I think it's, you know, to start, it's even simpler. It's even simpler. It's caring about your neighbor. It's saying we're all in the same boat or canoe, if you will, and ultimately seeking excellence. You know, trying to be the best place, the place that I saw on October 1st, 1965, trying to be the best place in the world. And once we understand that and all agree on it, we will have the best place in the world. I'm still hopeful about that.
Absolutely. I also think beneath the surface, there's an unresolved question, and that is, how should we honor the past? I think that most people in Hawaii want to honor the past, and they want to honor whom we have now started to call the host culture. But we have to find a way to honor the past without restricting or limiting the future.
There you go. We have miles to go,
Yes.
Keli'i. That's Keli'i Akina, Grassroot Institute. It's Keli'i and me, but it's much more than that. It's connecting the dots. It's finding our way to a better place. It's avoiding distraction. We'll be back next time we have a chance, together again, covering these same points on into much greater detail, much greater drill down. You'll see. Thank you, Keli'i.
Until then, aloha, everybody. Aloha. Thank you, Jay. Aloha.